That's what they say about our country. It's my opinion they hate our country. And that's not good. It's not acceptable.
There is no place anywhere for the president's words, which are not only divisive, but dangerous, and have legitimized and increased fear and hatred of new Americans and people of color.
Trump continued sparring with Democrats today over his critiques of the squad. Most media lemmings are spinning this as a loss for Trump, but that's not how my next guest sees it. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich, Fox News contributor, host of the podcast Newt's World. He joins me now. All right, Mr. Speaker, what does Trump have to do next to win the long-term war battle here with the far left?
Look, I think it's pretty simple. He has to stick to his ground. He has to emphasize that patriotism is not racism. He has to bring up the specific examples of things that people say, things that people do. You know, a Democratic Party which could not condemn anti-Semitism totally collapsed under the pressure from Congresswoman Omar and others. A Democratic Party which tolerates Antifa, which has been involved in violent crimes on the West Coast as an moderate, anti-middle class left-wing group. A Democratic Party which tolerates, for example, we just had 1,000 people storm a ICE facility in Colorado, tear down the American flag, repaint it, spray paint it, abolish ICE, put the flag up upside down as an insult, fly the Mexican flag, and the Democratic governor couldn't even condemn them. He said, well, people have these problems. So let's be clear. What you have on the left is an increasingly anti-American, increasingly open borders, increasingly pro-illegal immigration movement. And the president just has to, I think, stick to his ground. He thinks these people are dangerous. He thinks that what they represent is harmful. And he thinks, as President of the United States, he has a job to defend America culturally, as well as militarily and diplomatically.
Well, we had a promo running tonight, Newt. Rashida Tlaib is going to be on CBS this morning, tomorrow, and she wants everyone to know that, you know, she's being bullied. Let's watch.
I'm dealing with the biggest bully I've ever had to deal with in my lifetime, and trying to push back on that and trying to do the job that we all have been sent here to do, which is centered around the people at home. This is a distraction. The normalization of it, the fact that it's against our core American values, that they're choosing him over country.
God, that's like the Rolling Stones this summer. They're touring. I didn't know all four of them were on. This is like, I mean, but they do have this odd thing going on, this dynamic, Newt. They're the strong future, but they fall back on the damsels in distress deal. We're the victim. That's kind of a curious situation. They're elected members of Congress, for goodness sakes.
No, I don't think it's curious at all. These are totally manipulative, totally destructive people who are opposed to all core American values, people who routinely talk down the United States, people who are in favor of illegal immigration over law enforcement. You know, you just saw, I think 2 nights ago, Senator Warren say that when she's president, she's going to put in jail the people who are defending our border. So her position is, if you are enforcing the law, you could go to jail, but she's going to have amnesty for the people who have been breaking the law. So let's be very clear. These people have no obligation to be honest. They have no obligation to do anything but be manipulative. And this is straight out of the textbook for radicals in the United States. So there's nothing here. Saul Alinsky would be proud of them. This is, in fact, what his ground rules for radicals was like. We just have to be honest and blunt about who they are.
Yeah, and what they'll do.
They are destructive, dangerous, dishonest people.
Right. And Newt, I laid out in the angle what they would do if the Democrat Party is as captive to them as they certainly appear to be now. Like, imagine if a Democrat did win in 2020, heaven forbid. You don't think that AOC plus 3 plus God knows how many more would say, no, that doesn't work for us at EPA. That doesn't work for us for a Supreme Court nominee. You're not going to do that. No. They're going to have veto power over everything. And they believe that America, at her core, is a racist, evil place. That's what they believe. It was founded on racism, and it continues to be racist. That is at the core of their views, from everything that I've seen.
But look, it's not just them. If you watch, I mean, I was involved in 1983 in a fight with Speaker Tip O'Neill, very similar to the fight that occurred today on the House floor. Nancy Pelosi today, I think, lied in saying she'd cleared what she was going to say with the parliamentarian, because once she said it, the parliamentarian said it was out of bounds. She wasn't allowed to say it. She then left the floor, which is another violation of House rules. When she was overruled by the parliamentarian, they used their majority to change the rules. I mean, what you saw today was exactly what you're going to get if they're in charge. There are no rules except what they want. There is no truth except what they want to say. And, you know, last week Biden was supposed to be a racist because of his busing position. Apparently Pelosi was supposed to be a racist because she was opposing the Gang of Four. Now Trump is a racist. The left reverts to racist when they can't defend anything. And I think the big campaign next year is going to be between patriotism, as illustrated by President Trump's willingness to defend American values, the American border, the American rule of law, and this routine, automatic screaming racist by people who clearly are dishonestly using it because it's the only club they've got.
Well, they want to immunize themselves from any criticism, substantive or otherwise, because you cannot criticize them, because if you do, and I take them actually seriously, I take them at their word. I do. I think they have plans, and they want to carry out their plans for the entire country, and I guess we'll just see how that works out, But I think we're seeing how it works in Venezuela. We're seeing how it worked in Europe when they gave up their sovereignty. Sure. You know, they have the Yellow Vest movement. They had the Brexit debate. Germany's GDP outlook looks terrible. And you have the rise of the populists in Europe because it just doesn't work. But they don't care. I mean, in the end, Mr. Speaker, do you think they really care about the Democrat Party as long as their profiles are raised?
No, I think what they care about is power. I think they're fascists. I think they want to use the power of the state to change the rest of us. And I think they want the rest of us to shut up while they say anything they want to. And when we stand up to them, they frankly kind of go crazy. And I think that's just exactly the historic pattern when you're dealing with a fascist movement.
All right, Mr. Speaker, thank you so much. Great to have you on tonight.
President Trump's tweets attacking four Democratic congressmen uniting the party in condemnation, which could play right into the president's hands. My next guest telling the Washington Examiner, quote, "It is useful to remember Trump doesn't play tic-tac-toe, he plays chess. And he's very often setting up a much deeper fight than you might think. He wants the Democratic Party to identify with them. I think the president is often inartful, but remarkably effective." Newt Gingrich is the former Speaker of the House, a Fox News contributor and host of the podcast Newt's World. He joins us now. Mr. Speaker, good morning to you. Well, tell us, what is your thinking on this? You're making the case that this was very purposeful on the part of the president, and it's all playing into his hand.
Well, I think the president's making two different strategic steps here. One is he wants to make sure that the Democrats embrace the radical wing of their party, and Speaker Pelosi was trying very hard to separate them. And now they've been driven back together, and it's going to be pretty hard not to believe that they're all on the same team. And the president believes that the more radical the Democratic Party is, the more likely it is that we're going to end up with Kevin McCarthy as the next Speaker of the House, because they're marginal Democrats. If they get identified with these radicals, they're just going to lose. And I think in that sense, if you watched the debate yesterday and the vote last night, the president successfully reunified the Democrats around the radicals. Second, I think a major thematic next year, much as it was in 1984 with President Reagan, is going to be patriotism. And every time the president says patriotism, the left-wing media, the propaganda wing of the Democratic Party, yells racism. I mean, the number of times the various left-wing media were using the word racist or racism this week is amazing. And the question is, does the average American think, if you, for example, if you object to 1,000 people attacking a federal building in Colorado, tearing down the American flag, defacing it, hanging it up upside down and putting next to it a Mexican flag, if you object to that, are you a patriot or are you a racist? And the left will scream racism. But the rest of the country is going to think, you know, that stuff's crazy, and that as a patriot, I deeply oppose that. So I think the president's setting up a big national debate next year over the nature of patriotism and whether or not you're allowed to have free speech if you're a conservative, not just if you're a radical.
Well, when it comes to this most recent instance pertaining to the president's tweet, I guess it depends on who you ask, because Hakeem Jeffries was on this morning making the point that from his position, this disdain on the left for President Trump is a unifying force for the Democratic Party. Here's Hakeem Jeffries.
The progressives are not the problem. The New Dems are not the problem. The Blue Dogs are not the problem. The birther-in-chief is the problem. That's a unifying theme, not just for the House Democratic Caucus, but for the nation, because the existential threat to our democracy, to our way of life, to our values is so severe.
He's making the case, obviously, that this could unify his party.
I think it will unify his party, just as the other night you had all 10 candidates in the debate raise their hand over things like open borders and Medicare for all and so forth. There's no question in my mind the Democratic Party is going to be remarkably unified, but it's going to be remarkably left-wing. You know, in 1972, when they nominated George McGovern, he was seen by almost everybody as so radical that the rest of the Democrats could say, not me. Well, what's happening now is just the opposite. They're all the same person. It doesn't matter whether they nominate Biden or Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders or Senator Elizabeth Warren. They're all the same left-wing, hardline, fringe politicians. So they're going to be very unified. They're going to get 40% of the vote under any circumstance, and they're going to have huge enthusiasm.
Well,
but they may, in the process, scare away most Americans.
The president's got a rally later today. You think he doubles down on this? You think he owns it?
Probably. I mean, look, the president believes if the issue is, do you think people who are hardline left-wingers, people who can't even tell the truth about the Holocaust, people who can't tell the truth about 9/11, people who lie about the border, which clearly AOC did, if you think that's appropriate, then you ought to be a left-wing Democrat. But if you think America is a country worth defending, if you think our border is worth defending, if you think we have a right as Americans to expect the rule of law, then you're going to end up being with Trump. I think that's his basic thematic from now to Election Day, that you have these two choices,
well,
a hard left choice and the rest of us.
He'll be rallying later today. We'll see what he says. Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, always good to talk to you, sir. Thank you.